Get this change on them boys. Hold up, what's it? That's my audience is. Don't make me run down the light on the squads. They over there. You know, it puts politicals into a certain camp. You need the geometry of the genomes. Getting all the ducks lined up is something equal to knowing not to put all the eggs in one basket. Because when they say your health is your wealth, or at what degree and to what point, this is something the best tax collector in the world should, the best insurance agent in the world, to quantify the sky falling. And then it really brings a new calculation of what taxes could be with insurance. It's like to what degree would all the cells line up to reject something that could save your life, or better yet, keep something out that would take it. Aspects, it's equal to your entire genome being put on some beam as if it was a stable structure enough to hold up an entire house. That really brings into new terms what it means to bring home the bacon, or be wearing the pants in a relation. That rhymes, so it must be right. And so like having an expansion on the results, you know those wind-up toys? Well, what would make the clock wind up as if everything was broken loose? All molecules are connected by a force. It's kind of like a bond that is of a spring. But if you have a massive spring with every molecule on Earth and you're unwinding that, that's the energy expansion of what a singularity would look like if it were trying to be kept inside the center of the planet. So it's as though you could be measuring an osmosis of nature itself. This would be just as an entropy doesn't have to go forwards in time. It always ends up with the arrow of time going forward. The path of least resistance, utilized at its finest scale. We've got all these satellites and 5G panels. Why not put them to use? So in handling thermodynamics is one constant that can never change, and is tightly interwound with kinematics, where the thermodynamics is as the relation of a reflection to an absorption. Those panels that were black has a certain absorption rate of the road. These are what would be a black body of what could absorb. Here's the panels. In order to have the best schematics, you need the most horrendous situations. I've thought up of the worst possible scenario. If you have a singularity, this is the thing within inside of a black hole. You had that in the center of the Earth. Everything outside of it would be like vacant because it would all be gone in a flash. The energy of that is so chaotic that everything about it is basically of a plasma of the early universe. Such a constraint would be the only thing that could keep a singularity without it spaghettifying everything about it. This circumstance can only be housed within a firewall, which would be on the outside of the early plasma. But the early plasma would just constitute for all activity on the Earth, which is a potential energy. The difference between mass and weight is a gravity pull on the object. That's its weight, and its mass is how many things it's being made up of, is a collective of its mass. The difference between an acceleration and a constant velocity isn't the distance, because it can have an entire distance between it two. It's the measurement of the speed when the acceleration meets a constant velocity, as that is the relation between the two. The distance between the two can be different, even though that they're reading the same speed. So if you did have a singularity in the center of Earth, how would you be reading it? I think that has to be done so delicately that it's as if you were submerging cuckoo clocks into a liquid, and then their gears would be dissolving, and then they break out of the cuckoo clock, and it would be as if origami was surfacing. So if you have a singularity at the center of Earth, the potential that would be of which you could calculate the worst possible scenarios and use that as a scope for better and better health results in order for your body not to reject you. How contorted an object is a reading of how constant the livelihood is. But it can't get contorted, for the quality of life is different than the life sustainability. And so the amount of efficacy is always going to be a higher ground. And the more that you can show that colorfully, you're going to find a harmony. And so the harmony is where no one wants to be sick. And so you can easily see, and that's going to be clearer to see the more you introduce meteorology within a narrative that everyone can read, but maybe poetry within a fairy tale regime. I would love to attune electronic computers to how great meteorology is. With every droplet of rain, you know, like the maximum amount and the minimum amount from the start to end is somewhat of like an entire thawing of ice in the river bend. As if you had an entire world as a gold nugget or a fine diamond, a singularity at the center of the earth, so that the kinematics of the energy is met and canceled to be safe. That might be the actual best way, but it's incredibly dangerous at everyone's dismay. That's like trying to storage stuff without knowing the composite of where they're being deposited. How does storage work is it's a collection. And when you're wet, it's gonna collect more rain as opposed to just going outside and being dry and dodging a whole bunch of droplets. That is biodegradables is a scale that anyone can read, because if it's made up of BS, it'll be easier to see than something that isn't conduct what would be the solution to being endangered. You know, yesterday I showed some footage of some reflective surfaces on the side of the road to see what's going on the side of the road. So that is a time bend. And so in order to time bend a reality that's shaped and it can be warped and demented, that would be the wrong way of going about it. But in order to have a sculpted reality of fine degree, you have to get 10 times more creative than blocking a bridge. That might look like is building or engineering an environment about it. Has a message that's 10 times better than what could be an obstruction. So I know that the spread of disinformation is at its all-time high. And just as important it is to not have ice and slip on the ground, it's knowing the deviations where the flooding of concrete that was laid out uneven, to prove the point that they have the freedom of choice. How important hazardous waste is and biodegradable material, how clean a water is. If I went in here and started to bathe, how much of its runoff is from this graveyard that's downhill from it? These are questions that ethically need to be comprehended